Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory and you're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube page, which is a cozy corner of the internet where we play around with narrative. And what we do here on Thursday nights on the Varietal Show is we play solo and indie tabletop RPGs, but with a focus towards sort of how we can use that for writing stories and creating stuff. I do like games for their own sake, by the way, but for the most part, that's what this stream focuses on. This one's a little more gamey and a little less story-ish. I'll say more about it in a minute. I will explain the rules. This has a pretty simple rule set, though, so I don't think we'll be spending most of the stream discussing the rules like we have been for a couple of streams on other games. If you don't want to hear any of this, you just want to get to the start of the writing in the game, and you don't care about knowing anything about the mechanics or anything that's going on, or the building of the characters, down in the description below, there will be timestamps that let you jump ahead to those sort of key points. If you just want to know what we came up with, I'll sort of read it back as a story because we'll be writing as we go at the very end, if that's what interests you. But if you do want to know about the game, you can also just stick around and I will explain it in a minute. If you are watching this live, though, down in the especially for this one, there's a live chat. I keep forgetting. I think it's on this side of the screen. Guys, am I pointing towards the chat or is it this? Because it's like 3 layers of mirrored before I've completely lost track of what direction it would be on for you. But I think it's actually this way, even though that's opposite for me. Anyways, there's people in the live chat. Folks in the live chat that I am very happy to see. But if you want to join in the live chat, as we go along in this game, we're going to be interpreting prompts for the dungeon that we're crawling. And you can help us interpret that. In other words, you can kind of be collectively with the chat, kind of a DM. Yeah. I think that's all I have to say. If you're live, you can join the live chat. If you are not watching live, you can skip my awkward pausing and so on by going down the description and hitting those timestamps. I see. Zombie Wolf says, if you don't care about any of this, there'll be timestamps. If you don't care about any of this, why are you here? I think some people come by to find out the game because I haven't done it in a little while, but I do try to, especially if I like a game, I do try to give a little written review under their, in whatever comment section it is. It's usually itch.io. And of course I'll link it because if somebody's thinking of buying the games, they want to see how it plays. So, yeah, that's who it's aimed for. If you just want to know the rules and you don't care about like the community or me as a personality or anything like that, there's the option. Yeah, that's right. Witchery. Is that not the description of all like D&D though? Witchery says, I think some people search for a game and then stumble upon our weekly group therapy that sometimes has dungeons. That's my experience of all D&D. I'm running a group therapy of people who are using like, you know, metaphorical hand puppets to deal with their problems. Witchery says, still hacking up a lung. What can you do? Well, get better, Witchery. I hope you can get better. I hope it doesn't scar anything. And I see Jump Story is here. Hello, Jump Story. I hope you're feeling okay today. And Zombie Wolf. And I know Tammy said she wouldn't be here this today, so that's fine. We're fine. I didn't say hello to Uncle Kitty last time, so hello, Uncle Kitty. And Genera, I don't know if you'll make it in today, but if you don't, hello to you. And Lizzie Rose, who sometimes makes it to this stream. Okay. Let me tell you about this game then. I don't think there's any other sort of thing to do but to tell you about the game. I like this game. That's why I'm doing it in the middle of August, because I don't know if anybody else will. This part of the show is called litgames. It stands for literature games, and that's kind of my catch-all phrase for solo tabletop RPGs, journaling games, I don't know, the card crawls. There's like 15 billion names. If there's anything millennials love to do, it's give things 600 new names that already had like 1 or 2 before. So I'm reversing that process by calling them all literature games. In other words, the game's focused on writing. And this is the main part of the show. This is the show. What we're going to do is we're going to explain some rules for our game today, and then I'm going to get into writing once we sort of develop our characters a bit as a chat and a group, so you can make recommendations in the chat. Anyhow, the game that we're playing today is called One Shot in the Dark. One Shot in the Dark, which is a name that for some reason just keeps slipping out of my head. But you watch, I'll forget midstream. Anyways, One Shot in the Dark was developed by a person who runs a podcast called The Tale of the Manticore, I believe. I have not listened much to the podcast. I sort of gave it a listen. It sounded good. If you're into sort of that thing, like long form, multi-season playthroughs of our campaigns, if you will. I haven't listened for just a very basic reason that I'd struggle to get along with like long form D&D content. Not for any obvious reason. I think I'm just fiddly or fidgety, rather, I should say. Even people that I really like I really like Outside Xbox and Outside Extra. They're kind of the same group. And they have Ox Venture. And I like all the personalities involved, and I watched that one for the longest, and then I just kind of got bored and stopped watching it. And I think that just shows I just don't have a mind for it. I just can't sit there and listen. My partner really likes Critical Role. Anyways, it's that kind of thing. But this game is not on itch.io. This game is on DM's Guild, and if I do remember, I think it's DM's Guild anyways. It's one of those, part of that group of companies. If I don't remember, somebody harass me in the comments, but when this video is no longer live, I will pin the links where you can buy it. It's only $1.50 American, which is a bit more for me in Canada. And it is a solo D&D, basically. It's kind of an old school style because the podcast is using sort of old school, which is a whole movement in tabletop RPGs. And the way that I was able to afford it, by the way, as a person who is quite well and truly not well funded by himself, was a regular viewer and lovely person, Witchery, gave me a donation to my Ko-fi. I say coffee because that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, but when you look at it, it's Ko-fi. If you want to help support me, there is a link in the description where you can give to my Ko-fi. But you really don't have to. It's nice when it happens, but it's not required. I hope you just enjoy the stream. But anyways, Witchery was very kindly gave a donation last month, and for that reason I was able to purchase this when I would have normally had to pass on it. Which we'll see how Witchery feels about that. Drive-through, correct. Thank you, Witchery. And Witchery says it doesn't help that you run this during Critical Roles. I found that out later. I didn't realize they ran on Thursday nights. Zombie Wolf says $1.50 US is like $10 to a Canadian. Well, it's not that much of a divide, but it is a fair bit more. It's like $2.25, which isn't much in the long run, but still, it's quite a percentage difference, especially when you get to larger things. Larger costing things. But anyways, I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to know you to know that's where part of the money that I was given went. But I think you might be disappointed because Witchery, it involves both cards and several dice. And for those who are not regular viewers, Witchery doesn't like when games require a bunch of extra stuff, especially cards. So maybe I'll never get another donation. Anyways, One Shot in the Dark. This does play for more people. It's 1 to 4 players. They call it a rules ultra light RPG. It is very rules light. I feel like I've played lighter rule games. Ultra, it made me think that it was like had one rule basically, because I've played some pretty light ruled RPGs, tabletop RPGs. However, what I will say is that normally when I'm actually not a huge fan of rules light systems usually, Normally, I don't like rules light systems because I feel like what happens, the way that they make it rules light, is they make it decision heavy by leaving a bunch of vagaries in the system, right? So what they'll do is they'll be like, you have health points and that's about it. And then whether something hits or not, they'll sort of defer off to mechanics that either aren't very satisfying because they're basically totally chance, or with no ability to affect the probabilities or no choices involved. And I don't really like that kind of thing in a game. It works well enough for the storytelling focused games that we play. But the good news is that I don't feel like that's the case with this system. One of the reasons I wanted to play this one, there's lots of solo dungeon crawling tabletop RPGs, is that I feel that, well, this is rules light, and you'll see how quickly we can relearn these rules. It doesn't feel like anything is missing. It doesn't feel like I'm left with too much decision making about where rules should be, if that makes any sense. Oh, Genera did make it. Hello, Genera. I'm getting D&D vibes with this one. Yes, I sort of made my own cover. That cover art, by the way, I should say, I might get ceased and desisted on. I did a thing I never do, which used pre-existing art. So if it changes, you'll know why. But it's a cover from a Choose Your Own Adventure series that D&D had going in like I think the 80s or maybe the 90s. Anyways, let's learn about the system before I get myself too distracted. It doesn't take too long. I am already gonna have to turn my air conditioning on. I apologize to headphone users. You will hear a bit of a rush in the background. Please remind me to turn it off at some point. That's exactly the way I feel Witchery. Witchery basically says, a lot of lighter games just make me wonder why I don't just steal the setting and write. Yeah, that's the same way I feel. Like, I feel like the mechanics should meaningfully come up, right? In those moments of indecision and whatever, they should direct me. And I don't feel like that happens in a lot of rules light systems. Okay. So, here's the gist of it. I'm going to give you a few pieces of information very quickly, but chat, I'm going to invite you early on to think about how you want to contribute to this, because first of all, our party is pre-decided. Whether you're playing with 4 people, 3 people, 2 people, or 1 person, in this case it'll effectively be 1 person, you have a party of 4. And in that party of 4, you are preset on what those classes are. Let me zoom this in a bit. Could probably even zoom it in more. What happens if I go to 150? Is that too much? Yeah, a little too much. Let's go back to 125. So your party will consist of 4 things: a warrior, a cleric, a thief, and a wizard. Okay? Warrior, a cleric, a thief, and a wizard. So the first thing, while I describe these rules, chat, I want you to think about the name of the warrior, the name of the cleric, the name of the thief, and the name of the wizard. If you want to kind of split it up amongst each other, you can. I will come in and I'll sort of have to adjudicate, I'm sure, conflicting decisions and make a call. It's nothing personal. That's the nature of not a large chat, but multiple people being in chat making recommendations. But don't feel bad if I don't pick yours. There's not usually much rhyme or reason to it, other than I can see a way that I could like construct some narrative moment out of one thing and not another. Anyways, so our party is preset, and those are the classes we have to use. Each of the classes kind of has their own unique thing going on, and I really like the way they handle it. So you'll notice, first of all, that you have a dice value next to each name. So the wizard is a D8. If you are not a complete dork, why are you watching this stream? You need a D8, which comes in any standard set of D&D dice. You're going to need a standard set of D&D dice and a deck of cards. So that's the D8. That's the warrior. Okay? This is the cleric. It's a d6. I'll talk a little bit about these classes in case you're new to them. That's a d4. It's a little pyramid. Three-sided pyramid. Witchery says, not a dork. Get out. I just don't know why you would be on some, like, dusty, abandoned corner of YouTube watching a live stream with some random Canadian playing a solo tabletop RPG you've probably never heard of before. If you weren't kind of already a bit of a dork. Like, maybe, I don't want to offend anybody, but, like, maybe some people are in denial about it, but I can't imagine why you'd be here otherwise. Anyways, so you need at least those dice because a thief, wizard, cleric, and warrior each have these dice. Now, these dice serve a few different purposes, and I'm going to list them now. But before I do that, if you are completely new to the whole idea of a medieval fantasy, high fantasy, tabletop RPG kind of thing, I will say the setting is a bit flexible on this, based on what you want to do. The warrior is the person who is most likely to hit and most likely to do the most damage in just with a sword, right? Just a big bonk with a sword kind of person. In D&D 5e terms, the warrior here is a lot like a fighter. And in most systems, they would be probably what you would call a fighter, now that I think about it. They also have the most amount of HP, so that means they're the person who can take the most hits. And conceptually in the game, that usually means they're at the front line because they're the ones hacking and slashing at them. So the warrior is the person who takes the most damage and delivers the most damage. Jumpstore says, Rory coughed, he's got the plague. Yeah, like in movies, where, the cough is always the indication that that person is going to get terribly sick. Okay, the cleric. Now, clerics have different conceptions from system to system. But generally speaking, in modern terms, clerics are some sort of holy person. Forget, like, when I say holy, I don't mean a pope or something like that. Though, if you wanted to do that kind of coloring, classic original D&D monks were like that. Monks became, in more modern editions, like Tibetan monks with, like, weird karate skills and stuff like that. I realized Tibetan karate doesn't make any sense, but that's kind of the conception of the modern version of the monk. But the original version of the monk was the bowl cut kind of monk. Anyways, clerics are not quite that. What clerics are people that usually function as a healer. They give healing powers, and they're particularly good at dealing with whatever's at the opposite end of their spectrum. So if they're with, the god of life and sunshine, then they tend to be more effective against, like, shadow monsters and whatever. In this case, in this game, the cleric is sort of a bit of a hitter because D6 is better than the other two classes. But mostly is there to heal sometimes and to deal with some other special things. Anyways, a thief in D&D 5e terms, if that's where you're coming from, would be a rogue. For the rest of you, I don't think I need to explain it. It's just a something. They usually classically have daggers and sneak in the shadows, good at sneaking, good at picking locks, which is how they're conceived of in this game. There are things that you simply cannot do if your thief is dead. And then finally, your wizard, I think, needs the least explanation. They are very weak, usually characterized like older academics of the high fantasy world, but they can cast usually very destructive spells. And they have range. And that's kind of the case here, although the positioning doesn't matter in this game, so range won't matter, but we'll deal with that. So that's the classes. You start, whether you're playing with 1, 2, 3, or 4 people, you start with these 4 characters. Okay? If anyone is actually worried about my coughing, we just have a little bit of smoke in the air. Which I know because I cough the same way every time it shows up. Okay, so we got our big beefy sword man and our warrior or woman or MB or whatever else. Cleric does some healing and does some hitting. Thief does some sneaking and opens doors for us and can bypass traps. And our wizards do magic. Okay, so that's our 4 classes. We need to name them. We need to give them a brief little backstory or something like that, which chat is welcome to join in. Anyhow, what are the features of these things and how does the game work? Okay, so when I encounter an enemy and I want to fight an enemy, there is no armor class in this game. Instead, what I do is I roll my character's dice, right? So let's say it's the warrior I'm rolling. The warrior is a D8, which means I will roll the D8 dice. Okay, I rolled a 4. Now, in this game, much like the way Trove did, I think Trove, I don't know intentionally or not, Trove took a lot of hints or cues from how structurally how combat works from this game. I'm not saying literally they did. I'm just saying there's a lot of commonality. But anyways, let's say my wizard, I roll. My thief, I roll. And my d6. Okay. The way that a hit works in this game is if your dice comes up above 3, you hit. So my D8 warrior rolled a 4, which is a hit. My cleric, which has a D6, rolled a 5, which is a hit. But my wizard and my thief rolled, you can't see that, a 1 and a 3, which don't hit. There is no variation from character to character or enemy to enemy. A 1 to 3 never hits. A 4 and above always does. And so what that means is that there is a 50% chance, actually better than 50% chance, that the warrior is going to hit. There is a 50% chance that the cleric is going to hit. But there's only a 25% chance that the thief and the wizard will hit. Okay? Hopefully that follows. So we rolled our attacks. The cleric hit with a 5, which is above a 3, so it hits. And the warrior hit with a 4, which is above a 3, so it hits. Now, to find out my damage, I roll the same dice, the D8 for the warrior, for example, again. I rolled another 4, which means I do 4 damage. So the beauty of this system is you roll the dice once, find out if you hit. If you hit, you pick up that same dice, roll it again. That's your damage. Now, if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to drop them in the chat. But that is the core battle mechanic of the game. There really isn't a ton else to say on the dice part of it, or the character stat part of it, other than to say each time you level up, you roll their dice again and add that to the health pool. So each character starts with the total value of their dice. That's why the wizard has 4 hit points, the thief has 4 hit points, the cleric has 6 hit points, and the warrior has 8. But when they level up, which I'll explain how that happens in a minute, when they level up, I roll the D8 again. I rolled a 3, which means at level 2, I would add 3 on to my total health pool. which brings us up to 11 hit points total. And there's 2 modes of the game. There's a hard mode where it increases your total, but it doesn't heal you. But usually the standard way is every time you level up, you go back up to full hit points and then add the new hit points on. So that's how hit points are added. That's how attacks are rolled and damage is determined, the value of the damage. How damage is delivered, both to you from enemies and to a group of enemies, is up to you. So you can decide if you get, let's say, 3 goblins, each do 1 hit of damage. You can decide that all of those hit the warrior. So that's a cool part of the strategy of it. You get to decide where the damage goes on your characters. You can split it up as well, as I think anyways. Okay. So now we get to the cards. The cards aren't very hard to explain. One thing I will say is my partner recently got me, went to a night market and got me a bunch of Kirby playing cards, which I unironically like Kirby. They are 100% counterfeit. You know that because every single card has art on it of Kirby. But the styles are different on practically every card. Anyways, I do love them dearly. And Nintendo has enough money. I don't really care that it's counterfeit. Okay, so Kirby is my card deck. But what you need is just a deck of cards. And you need to split them up into their 4 suits, remove the jokers, lay the 4 piles out, and the main pile you're going to use is the hearts. Shuffle the hearts, and then when you're moving, you pull from the hearts deck, you pull a card, and you look at a prompt list, which I'll show you now. I see lots of great names coming up in the chat. Don't worry, folks. I will not miss them. I might, but I will try not to. Okay. Going to show you what this list looks like. So you see the first level is called Caverns. And you can see there's the numbers here, but it's for hearts. And then each one we get a prompt and some mechanics. Sometimes a monster appears. Sometimes we find loot. Whatever else. So this is us moving through the room, is the hearts. Now and then we will find monsters, which are diamonds. And now and then when we defeat monsters or succeed on a check or something like that, which I'll tell you about in a minute, we will get loot, which is the clubs. And I don't know that spades ever comes up. Maybe it does. I don't actually remember seeing spades in here. Anyways, the way that you level up is the Ace of Hearts. So the thing about the Ace of Hearts, though, is it also has a rule that if you get the Ace of Hearts in the first 6 turns, you pick a different card and shuffle this back in. But outside of the first 6 turns, the Ace of Hearts is how you level up. And what that means is when I pull the Ace of Hearts, we go down the stairs to the next list of prompts, which is the different layer of the dungeon. Still using the hearts deck to get those prompts, but that's when we roll our health and heal and all of that. And in that way, it kind of reminds me of One Deck Dungeon. But yeah. Anyways. That's how leveling up happens. You find the Ace of Hearts after the first 6 turns of play, and then you can level up. And there are 3 levels in this game that you can go through. I imagine you could make more. I don't know if anybody's made more. That is one of the downsides in the game. It is a bit limited. Okay. So that's how loot happens. That's how prompts happen. The last thing I need to show you is I'm going to show you the player sheet it comes with first, and then I'm going to show you how we're handling this on stream. The player sheet has the warrior, thief, wizard, and cleric here. A place for all the loot you pick up, because you get a lot of items that are like one-time use. But you see there is a map here. It's just a grid. And the idea is that when you pull a card and you get a prompt for a room, it will tell you how many exits there are and stuff. You can draw that out. And the way we're going to do that on stream is with this lovely little service called dungeonmapdoodler.com that lets me basically... let's change the background a bit. Hey, what background do you think we should have? Grass, stars, or, I don't know, sand? Well, there's water, too. Grass, water, stars, or sand. First one to get 2 votes, I'll pick, because I don't want this hatch marking. But anyways, we can draw little rooms as we get prompts. That's the idea. And then eventually, we will get a dungeon floor. Anyways, tell me what you want for the background on the map. It doesn't really matter. It's just aesthetically appealing. And yeah, so traditionally you would play this game either alone or whatever, and you can play it with just this one sheet of paper, drawing as you see fit. The last couple of things I have to say is ability checks. So ability checks, the way that the game rates it is you roll a d20, which is like the core dice for most modern popular tabletop RPGs anyways. You roll a dice, and if you get an 11 to 20, you succeed, and if you get a 1 to 10, you fail. Which means that this is just being treated as a coin flip. I don't know why you need a d20 for that. You do need a d20 for some of the mechanics later in the game. Some of the cards you can pull, sometimes you can roll, if you roll a 1, you have a bad thing happen. So you will need a d20. But I don't know that that really matters for the skill check. It does mean skill checks are just luck. But I'm going to use my coin. My favorite Metroid glow-in-the-dark coin, with the blue side being Samus looking at all the animals she's saving, and the red side being a skull in Samus's helmet because of all the animals she didn't save. So that means when we get a skill check, I will flip this coin. Blue is success, red is failure. The way that skills work in this game, because they are just luck and unadjustable probability, is basically you cannot make certain skill checks if you don't have certain people still alive in your party. The biggest one is the thief. You can't sneak past anything. Sometimes you'll get a prompt that lets you sneak. You can't sneak if you don't have the thief alive in your party. You can't pick a lock or disable a trap if you don't have a thief in your party. Traps automatically trigger if you don't have a thief in your party. So instead of like the thief is the best at that numerically, you either can do it or you can't. And that's why it's literally a coin flip. It's just that the thief is the only one who gets to flip that coin. And there's some truth for that about some of the other abilities that are tied to particular classes. Last thing, and then we'll get to the story. Telling and the playing of the game. And the making of the characters, really. Last thing. Spells. Only the clerics and the wizards can cast spells. And the way that spells work is every time you level up, the cleric and the thief get to pick a spell from the list. So, for example, a cleric can heal, which means they add 4 HP up to any one character's current total hit point pool. Or they could take Bless, which gives a +1 on all attacks and damage rolls for all characters for 1 round of combat. There's a few other ones to pick. Wizard spells are like blowing things up or being invisible or whatever, and it lets you skip rooms and things. But the way spells work is this. You can use spells anytime, in or out of combat. When you use them, they do not replace attack rolls. You can still make an attack roll. But once you use them, they're gone. You cannot use them again for the rest of that playthrough. And what happens is when you level up, you get to pick another spell, but you cannot pick the same one twice. So basically, the strategy here is that you have to pick a spell. It's your one shot you get to spend at that level, so you spend it wisely. Once it's spent, that spell is gone. So picking when you take spells really matters here because you have 3 floors of a dungeon you got to complete until you get to the final boss. Witchery says, so what you're saying is this game should be called Protect the Thief. Yeah, I do think the thief is pretty important. It's good news is that you get to choose where damage goes. There's also mechanics in the game where you can pick up, you can replace party members if they were down. Like, I think there's a prompt where you find a prison and you can choose to replace somebody if somebody is dead. Okay. That's all the mechanics, which sounds like a lot, but normally in these descriptions of mechanics, it's like 2 games to do it, but that's it. That's all I have to say on mechanics, because that's all the mechanics. Well, all we have to do now is create our characters, write a little intro scene, get them into the dungeon, and start drawing cards. And for that reason, this game is brilliant. Oh, Jump Store, that's so sweet of you. Jump Store doing labor. Jump Store, I have no money to pay you, but I appreciate it. Jump Store says, so Rory doesn't have to scroll. So far, names and characters we have. Cleric, Reverend Hubert, Leebody, Warrior, Epimetheus? Epimetheus? Oh, that is such a familiar name to me. I mean, obviously it's Greek. What? Who is that? That's obviously some... I'm betting that's a Zombie Wolf recommendation? Because it's usually... No, I think that's probably a Jump Store. You'll have to tell me. How well do I know my group? Pay me in Fantasy World Tea. Okay, absolutely. The thief is Karafi or Nice. Rory's choice. I'm not sure if the wizard has a name. Well, we can use both because those are both great names. Prometheus's twin. That's right. It's in the damn name, Rory. Epimetheus. Yes. Okay. Okay. Let me see what the backgrounds were. We got a vote for stars and a vote for sand. Let's see what the stars look like. I mean, they're pretty cute. I don't know why we're in a dungeon in the middle of space, but that's pretty cute. The stars were Witchery's recommendation, and Witchery was the... I don't want to say sponsor because there's like legal implications. Not the sponsor of the stream per se, but that is the simplest way to say it. We're going to go with stars. Okay. Let me get those names down. I'm not sure if the wizard has a name. Oh, okay. No. Oops. Okay. Maybe Nice is like a nickname, and Karafi is their proper name. I hate listening to my air conditioner. I really do, but it is warm today. Galen Blackwood. What is it about the name Galen that attracts to the magic folk? I have a person in my game. This isn't a criticism. We can totally go with Galen Blackwood. But in the Baldur's Gate 3, which I still haven't played, but everyone in my life has. I haven't played because I don't have a system that really can run it. Well, that's a lie. I have a PS5, but I do not want to play a point-and-click tabletop RPG with a controller. I've done it before. I did not enjoy it. And I don't have a computer that can run it, obviously. I don't have a computer that can run Google Docs and Streamlabs. Genera says, Niece is my nickname. Awesome. It's a good nickname. But then I also have, in my second D&D group that I do DMing for, I also have somebody named Gale, who is an Eladrin caster. Okay, Galen Blackwood. Genera says, playing it on Xbox, love it so much. You have more patience than me for the controls for that, to play that on a system. I know people keep telling me it's not so bad with controller, but I don't know. Like, I tried to play Kingmaker on PlayStation Plus when it came through. I just ended up, this was back when I had money. I just ended up buying it for my laptop and played it on there. Ugh. If people had to guess, I know I've said it on stream before, but I'm sure no one remembers. If people had to guess, what is my go-to class when I play as a player in 5e, which is rare, by the way. I'm not usually the player. What do you think my class is that I go for? Let me just put these in our character sheet, and then we'll get to writing. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and not make it that big. There we go. Genera says Druid. Okay. I'm going to let some other people make some guesses. I feel like you'd be a fun barbarian, to be honest. I should say, I think I've played most of the classes. I didn't... Well, no, that would be giving tips. Never mind. We'll see what people come up with. Zombie Wolf says, lol, doing his ancestors proud. Isn't that the truth? Okay. The warrior doesn't get spells. The cleric does. We are too chicken to guess and get wrong. Well, Witchery's correct. Barbarians. I've played 4 different barbarians, but there is one that I consistently play if I just need to, which I've brought into my games on the stream before, named Var. But I think it's unexpected because obviously I do have a mind for mechanics and rules. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to learn these games every week. And yet I find myself not terribly interested in being a caster. The one exception is I do enjoy being I'm trying to think of what is the PG way of saying this. A mess with your mind bard. So like, because I'm more creative than anything else, so bards give a lot of flexibility to how you want to mess with someone, enemies and stuff. Jumpstore says healer. I've recently been wondering if I should play a healer because nobody ever wants to play healers, and I want to know a way to make it interesting. But I would play a healer like the way I would play a paladin is the way I'd never see people play a paladin, which is they should be deeply annoying. You know, like, and I don't mean like they should be stymieing other people's stuff, but paladins are supposed to be zealots, but not in a fun way. Like, they're supposed to be the knock on your door religious types who are like, have you heard the good word about this one god that I'm obsessed with? Jumpstore says, damn it, I posted too slow, and Rory answered. I never know if I've passed the point that anyone cares or whether I should give more time. Sometimes I misjudge that. Okay, we have to pick our spells. Chat, if you do not care about mechanics in a game, feel free to just listen to the dulcet tones of the backtrack. But for those who care, the first thing we have to pick is the cleric spells. I'm going to list the cleric spells. It's a lot of choices. We're going to go into the first level of the dungeon. Remember, we only get to use it once. Full stop. Ever. We cannot pick it again, and we do not get another spell until we level up, which is when we leave this floor of the dungeon. Okay? But you see, that's the problem, Zombie Wolf, is that paladins, they just play them like fighters with casting, and that's not fun. Paladins should be like, I have all this power, but I'm not going to use it because that would be cruel and we must talk to him first, or something like that. But they just play it because it's the class that can be the most min-maxed. It just attracts min-maxers, and I don't like that. I think that there's a lot of fun to be had with a paladin. If that's what you mean, unless there's some other implication there. Okay. Cleric spells. Heal. I mean, it heals someone. Bless. You get a +1 on all attacks, but it's only for 1 round of combat, by the way. For a spell, you can only use once. I feel like it should be for the whole combat, but okay. Banish, destroy 1 undead enemy other than a boss by the power of faith. So you just eliminate an enemy, but it has to be undead. Holy weapon. The cleric deals double damage for 1 battle. I will say that there is a final boss in this game. It is decided by a card draw, so you don't know what it is. But that feels like a later game final boss thing. Divine Aid. All damage sustained is cut in half and rounded down for 1 round of combat. So, 4. Witchery says, I like Rangers, Druids, and Bards. I like those classes. Rangers just never do anything interesting anymore. And I think actually the reason for that is because overworld travel, where Rangers were supposed to shine, has been largely just resigned to a brief paragraph of description by DMs. So I've been trying to bring it back, counting days and rations more, because I think it makes Rangers feel more vital. Anyways, so for those who are interested in the mechanics, and if no one is, I will just pick one. Genera's got to go. Good to see you, Genera. Heal, bless, banish, holy weapon, or divine aid. Heal, heals. Bless, 1 round. Everyone gets +1 to their attacks. Banish only works on undead, but it does outright destroy them unless they're a boss. Holy weapon deals double damage for 1 battle. That feels like a final battle thing. And divine aid cuts damage in half for 1 round of combat. Which one do we want to put on our cleric? I'm going to drink some water. Okay, we're having some discussion. Jess says Holy Weapon. I think Holy Weapon is cool. Zombie Wolf says heal, but since our party doesn't have a healer. Yeah. 2 votes for heal. We'll go with heal. That heal is usually like the good one for the early game because oh, I named him after the cleric who brought down the children of the damned. I've never seen that. So it's in keeping. I like that characterization. I'm going to carry that into it, yes. We will get a chance to pick that spell. I just think we should pick it last. Jumpstore says Divine Aid sounds like it could be very helpful. Okay, so we had 2 votes for heal, so I'm going to go with heal. I do agree with you, folks. Spells are not game-changing here the way they are in other things. They're just like an extra little bonus, so don't worry too much about it. Okay, let's look at wizard spells. Most of the wizard spells are about blowing things up, which is accurate to D&D. But some of them are about bypassing prompts you can get. I'll say that in general, and then I'll read them out, and then we'll pick one, and then I think we can just get to character building. Like, the story stuff. Blast is one wizard spell. Deals 1 to 6 damage to one enemy with no attack roll needed. How is the damage decided then? Do you roll a d6? Knock. Bypass any one barrier or trap, no roll needed. That is a classic spell from D&D as well. Although it doesn't usually work on traps. So that's sort of like if you didn't have your thief, or if you didn't want to risk your thief failing. Mass invisibility. Avoid any combat except the boss. Maybe? You know, when you're at low levels, survivability is the traditional thing you go for. Enthrall is a charm spell. For those who know the games, that this is based around enemy must save or join the party as a faithful ally until dead or the level is complete. Does not work on boss or undead. In other words, you just get like an extra dice of attack and damage. It's pretty powerful. But again, we can only take it once. And once we use it, it's gone. Poison Cloud. Automatically inflict 2 points of damage to every enemy, so an AoE. For those who don't know, that means area of effect. Lightning. On a successful attack, you roll a 4 on a d4. Instantly kills any enemy, including a boss. So it's a 25% chance to kill the boss in one attack. Well, that feels that I'm taking that off the table. We're not taking that first. That's pointless for early levels. So it comes down to Blast, which is dealing a lot of damage to one enemy. Knock, which is bypassing a barrier or a trap. Mass invisibility, which is a way to avoid combat. Enthrall, which is to force someone to join you as a fighter until the level is complete. Poison Cloud, automatically inflict 2 points of damage to every enemy. I should say, if they make the save, as I understand it, the spell is gone. So anything that requires a save may do nothing. GS says, I love invisibility. Invisibility is pretty big. Love poison clouds too. Yes, absolutely. Enthrall could come in handy many times during the game. I agree. Lightning is seems pretty traditional for a wizard. Rory nerfed my suggestion. I didn't nerf it. That's how it works. Take it up with the designer. You'll go with knock. Okay. Wow, we're all over the place. Okay, so we got knock, enthrall. Maybe. It wasn't necessarily recommended for the first level. A pass without a trace. I'm surprised how many of my parties I've DM'd don't take pass without a trace, given how massively powerful it is when you're trying to move around. Yes, it is. Witchery says blast is the ICAST fireball. Yeah, it's fireball. Well, it's fireball sort of, but it's only to one person, so I guess the poison cloud's more the fireball. Well, we all kind of landed on heal for the cleric, but we're all over the map here. I know some things you guys don't about the game, so I'm going to take Jumpstore's recommendation and go with knock. Unless what you're saying, Witchery, is you're voting for mass invisibility, in which case that would be 2 votes for mass invisibility, and that would then I would take mass invisibility. I feel like knock or mass invisibility would both make sense here. It is a toughie. The temptation, of course, with a wizard is to do a lot of damage, but until you know what the combat's like, it's nice to have the option to skip it, I guess is the way I feel. Although, I should say, GS, there is a, if you don't know D&D, there is a mass invisibility spell in D&D. It's high level, though. What Pass Without a Trace does is it just buffs stealth checks, doesn't actually make you invisible. But it is basically, you treating mass invisibility the same way here. We also only have one little thief. Okay, let's go with knock. I don't want to spend too much time on this, because we will eventually use it, and then when we level up, we'll pick another one of these spells anyways. Once it's... by the way, you don't have to use it. If you want to stack 3 spells and take that into the boss, you're welcome to do so. It's just once you use it, it's gone, and you can only pick a new spell on level up. That's all that means. Okay. Now, what it says in the game, which is makes sense for how this game is structured, is basically if you want to assign a fantasy race or something to any of these things, you're welcome to do so. It doesn't have any mechanical impact, but it might have storytelling impacts. And I think that's true, because the way it happens is you'll get pretty vague prompts with some mechanical implications, like 2 exits on a room and there's people sleeping there. But whether it's a dark room and therefore your elven wizard is the only one who can see through the darkness with his elf eyes, and so on and so forth, you know, that kind of thing is up to us and would be decided by our character traits. So with that in mind, I don't want to get too hung up on this, but I do want to have a little fun. Our cleric is Reverend Hubert Leebody. GS said it was based on a fellow from Children of the Damned, so I'm going to say human. And give me a personality trait and a physical trait for Reverend Hubert Leebody. So, for example, bald might be a physical trait, and personality trait, nervous in the dark or something, or talks too much, or is aloof to social cues. Things like that. Sorry, it's my favorite song on this playlist. Yeah, so physical trait and personality trait for Reverend Hubert Leebody. And if you want to start thinking about Epimetheus, Carafi, or Galen's fantasy race or whatever, and nearsighted. So, nearsighted. Sure can, Zombie Wolf. Shy. And quiet in speech. Okay, perfect. We got some info on Carafi, so we'll do that now. Elf. It's too bad Genera left. We could have gotten some of the features of Nice. That is to say, Genera. Physical traits and a personality trait for Carafi / Nice. So they're an elf, they're a thief. They scarred up, grumpy, optimistic to a fault, cocky but charismatic. Okay, so personality is cocky and friendly. I mean, charismatic's a fine word. Just actually trying to keep this on one line, unlike my failure with Reverend Hubert. And a physical trait, maybe tattoos? Maybe short for an elf? Maybe tall for an elf? Short for an elf makes more sense for being stealthy. A crooked finger from a childhood injury. Short, but handsome in the face. I love that. There's a way of describing someone being good looking. Okay. Oh, no. That's the wrong way. Our wizard, Galen Blackwood. I'm going to impose some things on Epimetheus. I'm going to say they are a Goliath, which is just sort of a giant, but not like a true giant, like maybe 8 to 9 feet tall. Physical traits, intricately braided red hair, and personality traits, easy to laughter / violence. Okay, what do we want for our wizard? Wizard Galen Blackwood. Could be a human, could be an elf, could be a dwarf, could be a hobbit, gnome. Tabaxi, which is a cat person. Or you could dip into the Pathfinder races, which is an enormous list. Jumpstore says, I approve of the Goliath race for Epimetheus. Yes. I don't really like so much how 5e forces a design on Goliath, like that they're bald and they have these markings on their skin. But I do like the concept of them. And I generally just ignore that aspect. I ignore a lot of their, like, fantasy stuff. Witchery says a hobbit. Yes, okay, hobbit. GS says he's two-dimensional, as in flat. Do you mean physically? Or do you mean as a personality? Well, if it's a hobbit, then the personality trait has to be hungry constantly. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that, but you let me know if you do. And then a physical trait... Hunched back from reading and writing all the time? Oh, physically, but wouldn't suit a hobbit. Oh, okay, I see. You do have very creative suggestions, GS. Even when I don't directly take them, they make me think of things. Like Pippin and Gandalf had a love child? Jumpstore. What could that mean? What do you mean? Unusually buff hobbit? Hairy and stinky. Well, it's got to be buff and stinky now. Buff/stinky. I'm gonna write this character and not know who they are until like halfway through their description. It's all show muscle, though. Okay. I do appreciate your reasoning, Witchery. I mean, it makes sense to me, but... okay, so we have our spells. I don't think anybody needs any explanation on how the game works at this point. I spent an hour talking about it. At this point, either you're not interested in the mechanics that much, or it doesn't matter. So, they have my favorite thing in the world. Actually, this module has two things that I think every solo or indie tabletop RPG person should put in their games. First of all, a quick start, like, just this is the steps to a turn, without all the description of what any of those things mean, just this is it all summarized, which is here. And the second thing is a little script or something that shows how gameplay should flow. GS says, we rarely have buff characters, so this is a novelty. We rarely have buff characters because we don't know what that would be like. It's a foreign experience. I don't know. Maybe some of you are weightlifters or whatever. In my 20s, I did some weightlifting for a few years. Not like for like shows or anything, but it was fun enough, you know, as a way to kind of turn your brain off and let some tension out. I do recommend it, but I don't really do it anymore. He always smells like what he's been eating. Jumpstore says Galen is a wizard, like Gandalf, but is constantly hungry. Ah, I see. You know, that makes sense when you say it like that. When you said it the first way, though, my brain went a totally different direction, and I just sort of saw Pippin, but with legs as long as Gandalf's. And it was horrifying. Nobody forced that thought on me. It's just what came. Okay. So the turn is we draw a card from the Hearts deck, look it up on the appropriate table for the given level, which we are level 1. GS said I had buff legs from cycling. I did do some cycling. I did a marathon, sort of. It was 120 kilometers a day for 2 days. And then I rode around the Gulf Islands here, a bunch of gear for 2 weeks. And at the end of all of that, I had 2 things. Worn off the cartilage on the back of my kneecap, which never comes back. And thighs that were the size of what both my thighs used to be. Zombie Wolf says, I recently noticed that Rory loves to stroke his beard. Yeah, beards are fun to stroke all the time. Makes me wonder what Rory did before his facial hair grew in. I don't know, bit my nails. Any nervous tick you have, I probably did it. Bounce my leg, fidget in my seat, grind my teeth. So we draw a card from the Hearts deck, and then we draw on our map, once we've interpreted the prompt, what the room looks like. We put in a description, and then we resolve any other kind of mechanics that happen. So, I'm going to draw a card from the Hearts deck, and it is an 8 of Hearts, and I'll show you the little Kirby art. Oh, Kirby. You are adorable. Gonna put that card aside. We're gonna go down and look at it. And we are on the Caverns, which is the first level. 8. Huge cavern, 3 exit. Wow, those are some chunky stalactites. And then we need to draw a monster card. Now, before I draw the monster card, I'm going to establish how our characters met and why we're here, and the description of this cavern. And I'm hoping not to get too bogged down in it, but it is 4 characters, so we'll see how it goes. And then hopefully we'll have enough time to do this combat and describe its outcome. But first of all, we need to draw our huge cavern. I think actually I can make this look more caverny. Yeah, freezing on me. All right. Well, it wasn't going this slow before. Hopefully I didn't, crash it. There we go. Let's not hold it down. Apparently, this can't handle that. There's our first room. Zombie Wolf says, I just realized today is the last stream before my birthday on the 17th. So this is the closest I'll get to a birthday stream for quite some years, as it turns out. Aww. Happy birthday, Zombie Wolf. You are welcome to tell me how old you'll be, but you do not have to. Thank you for tuning in and all your fun facts. May the next year. Oh, what was it I was going to say? Oh, come on, brain. I said it on stream. I said the way I'm going to say birthdays from now on is something like, let's rejoice that you've escaped the gaze of the harvester god for 1 year or something. Ah. 10 points to whoever reminds me of what I came up with. It's been lovely to get to know you, Zombie Wolf. I hope it was a good year for you. Or at least not the worst one you've had. Alright. There's our first room. There's our people. Do we want to just do the tavern meet? Why are they here? I guess maybe they were hired by someone as the typical thing. Cleric, human, a thief, and a warrior. Zombie says I'll be 30 as well. 30 was a rough birthday for me. Just as conceptually. Witchery said, I think the stream on my birthday this year was one of the canned ones. You mean like one I pre-recorded? Sorry, we'll have to keep doing this until 2029. Just trying to think of what connects these people. Remember, you're not a grown hobbit till you're 33. Oh, I'm not grown. Oh, that's right. Witchery says, I'm a January girl. You were sick a lot. I was sick, yeah, for like 3 weeks. And then I had a cough for another 2. Zombie Wolf says, I wonder who's your youngest chatter, Rory. I mean, I guess, but also I hope we all recognize that I can never ask that. Okay. The first indication that a stranger was in Epimetheus? Is that right? Was in Epimetheus's favorite tavern. Witchery says, I'm 33. I'm a grown hobbit, allegedly. I mean, I'm a grown by hobbit standards. Grown by human standards. Just emotionally young. Zombie Wolf says, well, we all know you're not a creeper. Well, I'm glad that I have not given that vibe, because I definitely am not. Thankfully, elves aren't adults until their 100th year. I bet my youngest viewers probably doesn't use the chat, if I'm being honest. The first indication that a stranger was in Epimetheus's favorite tavern was the odd and pungent odor of expensive... No, I'm going to be Canadian. Cheese. No one. Name of a town. Zombie Wolf. I know how much you love to come up with those. Something Tolkien-ish. Vale. Something. I keep looking at the little Kirby art. Is what I'm looking at, by the way. No one in the town of XYZ. Fill that in when I get it. No one in the town of XYZ had the money or nor will to splurge on moldy cheese from the big city. Valenheim, perfect. Yep. Yeah, that's true. Lots of social media doesn't even let you use it unless you're of a certain age, which, like, I do understand that a lot of socialization occurs online now, and I don't actually think that's a bad thing overall. But what I will say is I think you do kids a favor to not let them broadcast their thoughts until they are of a certain age. Because my God, the things that I thought at like 10 and 14, stuff I found funny when I was 16, I'm glad all of that can be vapors on the wind and I can grow up. Jumpstore says, well, we all know Tammy and Uncle Kitty are the oldest in the chat, probably. I mean, they're on the older end. I don't know for sure. No one in the town of Allenheim had the money nor will to splurge on moldy cheese from the big city. They ate the carrots and turnips that grew plentiful in their farms. Yeah. Yeah, I had a live journal. When they gave you the chance to like download it and save it, I did, and then I deleted it. And the thing that stood out for me about my high school years is that I was just mad at nothing. Like I did have like political implications and stuff at that age. I was political from a young age, but the thing that I would just be mad about nothing. I was just always mad. Which isn't how I remember myself and isn't how I come across in like video of that time, but I guess that's just hormones. They ate the carrots and turnips they grew plentifully. That grew plentiful in their farms. Simple folk, generally farmers, were the main... Witchery says Russia bought it years ago. Oh, I didn't know that. The only person I know who still uses it is George R.R. Martin, apparently. I don't know if that's still the case, but he did use it for well after it. It was good for writers, I'll say that. Simple folk, generally farmers, were the main people of the simple village at the foot of the Razor Peak range. Epimetheus a mercenary and fighter, a soldier by trade, but a mercenary. Why can I not remember how to spell mercenary? Oh my god. A soldier by trade, but a mercenary as of late, with the defeat of his king. Was a native born. Here to meet a wizard from the big city. Witchery says he moved. What Zombie Wolf says, I was the embodiment of I'm 14 and this is deep memes, so don't feel bad, Rory. I mean, you see, that's the thing. Like, I feel like being too online when you're young makes you too self-conscious about processes that you need to go through, right? Like, of self-discovery and emotional honesty, I feel like it beats it back. It punishes it in a way that isn't particularly healthy. So it's not just like I'm embarrassed that this still exists. We're all embarrassed by ourselves when we're young. But like it's also just that's what being young is to be around other kids and feel like you're pretty important and smart and whatever else. All those delusions you need to work through. Dream Width is still going to fork, and is a still going fork. Oh, it's a fork of LiveJournal. Was LiveJournal FOSS? I didn't know that. Epimetheus, a soldier by trade, but a mercenary as of late, with the defeat of his king, was a native born here. Was a native born to a small city. And he had drunk many pints in the walls of the Dwarf Echo Tavern. Feel free to give me a different name for the tavern. Yeah. Yeah, I have that sense too, Witchery. Also, like, when I grew up with the internet, it wasn't following you everywhere, right? Like, you could be a person one place and then someone else somewhere else, and then if you didn't want to be those people anymore, you simply left and went and became another person as you grew up. Whereas now, like, they want to connect you. Oh, yeah, little fan sites, yeah. He had drunk many pints in the wall. But today, he was here to meet a wizard from the big city. He didn't even need that wizard. He was certain. Was the hobbit in a stained robe with his feet kicked up on a stack of books. Turning pages with his left hand and biting off chunks of cheese in his right. Held by his right. I wasn't a gamer really until, like, I played some games when I was young. I remember being like 10 or 9 and playing the original Tomb Raider and stuff like that. And I played Max Payne when I was young, and I really liked that and things like that. But I didn't really get into games until probably in my late 20s. And it's weird how much I got into them, given that I didn't really have a history for it. Yeah, we do all need something to look forward to. And you need like a hobby to remind you that no feeling is final, right? Like, because it can change your mood, and then that reminds you that your mood can change, right? Because when you're really sad, it feels like you're going to be sad forever. Because that's kind of the lie that, depression and things like that tell you. So it's nice to have something that forces your brain to sort of run a different direction for a minute so you can remember that those things do change. With his bare feet kicked up on a stack of books, turning pages with his left hand and biting off chunks of cheese held in his right hand. He pulled the tattered Epimetheus pulled the tattered note from his pocket to remind himself. Scribbled at the bottom after the traditional missives was the name Galen Blackwood. That was his name. Galen Blackwood. Epimetheus stepped over, slid into the bench across from the feasting hobbit, and said, "Galen, right?" Oh, no, I didn't see that, zombie wolf. Bard and lied. Or lead. Because when you're drunk, suddenly everyone thinks they can sing. Most people do sing better when they're drunk. Not to say they sing well, but they sing better because the main thing that usually makes a person sing badly is they're too self-conscious, and so they try to control the tone too much and clench up their throat. The best thing you can do is really sort of wail until you figure out the right amount of air pressure to wail a tune. But well placed, okay. The Bardenlead Tavern. Galen, startled, from his reading and kicked his stack of old tomes onto the floor as he swung upright to meet the face of Epimetheus, to meet the gaze. Oh my. Galen said interrupting with a pungent burp. And then continued. You are twice as large as I expected, which is good. We are going to dangerous folk. After all. Yeah, I was a pretty quiet person, Jumpster. I feel like a lot of people are like this, but I was the kind of person who would like talk too much if I trusted and knew you. But otherwise, I'm kind of a quiet people watcher. And a big, heavy arm swinging a big, heavy stick is exactly why you were recommended. Epidermis. Epimetheus. I had it going, so Epimetheus, there we go. Witchery says, I always had books too. I did really enjoy and remember all the books I read, but I won't say I was ever a voracious reader. It's just so hard to focus sometimes. I mean, that fits with some things that you've said about yourself before, Zombie Wolf. It certainly was the way, let me put it this way, my other Sicilian friend was like that as well. Not to reduce things to, you know, genetics or whatever. People are diverse. He corrected with a furrowed brow. That pulled his scalp of intricate red braids laden. That were laden upon it. In which feathered knotted ends down his back. You know, honestly, Zombie Wolf, my experience has been that like, it's always in good humor, which is a Scottish person, well, not Scottish, that's an exaggeration. As a person who obviously still has some cultural elements from Scotland in his family, since we all sort of came from there a few generations back. Is a form of comedy that I could understand. Aw. The librarian brought more to the library for me. You know what I read? I read a lot of political stuff. Speeches from certain political figures and manifestos and things like that when I was in high school. But in between that, I read like existentialist novels and things like that. I mean, I definitely was who I was going to be from a pretty young age. Because I eventually went into, political and ethical philosophy and stuff like that in university. Oh, it's so nice that your librarian gave you a poster. Do you still have it, or has it been lost to time? Failing to read the room. Galen snorted. I am certain that's what I said. Epimetheus had a sharp word or two. Scratching. That wished to be loosed upon the stinky little hobbit. But before his better judgment could fail in such a way, as this was, after all, his employer, the door swung open behind them. In stepped an elf of unusual size, with a wide grin. She turned to the tavern keep and in a boisterous voice said, "I found me a mumbling monk who apparently shares my employer, fair keeper, and that means I seek for him on both our behalf." The slender elf dipped in a dramatic bow towards the tavern keep. The tavern keeper chewed at the tobacco leaf in his cheek for a moment, then said, "What?" There wasn't a lot of that in Canada, Zombie Wolf, thankfully. Well, at least not where I was. You go into the prairies, you find more stuff like that. Yeah, that's why they like newspapers. Well, indeed. Witchery, indeed. Alright. The tavern keeper chewed at the tobacco leaf in his cheek for a moment and then said, "What?" The elf, clearly a bit crestfallen that her rehearsed appearance hadn't made the desired impression, rephrased and said, "Galen, myself and this She turned but stopped short, seeing no one behind her. With a frustrated frown, she swung the door she had just entered back open and saw a nervous, robed man, apparently a cleric of one of the ascetic orders, leaning with his ear against the now absent door. She scolded, "Why didn't you follow me like we agreed?" GS says, "Sorry, dog duty. Hopefully it went smoothly." Sorry. The cleric muttered. Oh, wait, I already wrote it somewhere else. Karaffi grabbed the cloak of the cleric and pulled him into the tavern, continuing her conversation with the disinterested I am losing my mind. Why can I not? Interested, Rory. It's just one of those moments where you look at a word and everything looks wrong. The disinterested tavern keeper. We are looking for a Galen something wood. Blackwood. Galen shouted from the table where he sat with Epimetheus. He waved the young elvish rogue and her shuffling cleric compatriot over. GS says, love the color of Rory's shirt. It kind of glows. Oh, thank you. You probably can't see it very well. It just came this week. It's for Summer Games Done Quick, which was last month, beginning of the month. The proceeds go towards Summer Games Done Quick is Doctors Without Borders. And I also usually get an AGDQ shirt, which is has left my mind. Anyways, it's an event. It's a week-long marathon event where people speedrun video games. Oh yeah, Zombie Wolf says, I hate when I swear I'm spelling a word wrong because it doesn't look right, but my autocorrect says that's really how it's spelled. You know, more than once, especially on Google Docs. Google Docs has told me something isn't a word, and then I look it up and it is. So I don't understand what dictionary they use. Anyone else remember when there were a limited amount of web-safe colors? No, I don't. Oh, because people would like green screen and blue screen them out. Oh yeah, for sure. Yes, Jump Store. Doctors Without Borders is always good cost. And the AGDQ in the winter is the something to prevent cancer. I can't remember the full name of it. Anyways. Well, talk about a size difference. The gregarious elf exclaimed, looking between the small hobbit covered in crumbs of cheese. And the fire-haired Goliath with knees above, rising above the table line. Oh, no, I didn't know that, Witchery. That's why I've hired you. Exclaimed the hobbit. Because each of you is something I'm not. For the next 2 hours. Galen Blackwood. Renowned wizard and researcher of the arcane orders. Lectured his hired team on the various strange magical phenomenon that interested him. Each statement about his field of study led to side statements clarifying some obscure word, using more obscure words, and then that led to yet more clarifications on the statement that was clarifying a statement. The cobweb, the spider webs of thoughts that spilled from this self-assured little creature amounted to little interest from his company, who really just needed some work. Anyways, Web 2.0 killed the internet. Witchery says Bones Creek shakes cane. Yeah. Jumpstore says, I know we're not that far apart in age, Witchery, but I have no idea what the hell you're saying most of the time. You know, that might not be an age thing. That might be, like, I seem to follow Witchery's statements pretty well, but we're both from colonies of Britain, basically, and I imagine there's some cultural crossover there. There's lots of things Americans say that I have no idea what you're talking about. But Web 2.0 was when, instead of having, like, the way you used to find people, do you remember web rings? Does that mean anything to you? Because if it doesn't, then the shift that Reddit or things like that represents will be lost. Do you know what a web ring was? Who really just needed some work. None was dumb enough to interrupt their employer, but none really was listening. Witchery says, yes, they're coming back, but with the emphasis of a person who knows they're not. They used to run fun sites and fan listings. Jumpstore says, a what now, Rory? I'll tell you what. I'm going to finish writing this introduction and get us to that cavern. We're going to do that fight. I don't care how long it takes. We're getting to the damn fight. And if it's not super late after that, after I read the story, remind me and I will explain to the kids what a web ring was. Do you remember MSN Messenger and MSN Groups? I remember ICQ. MSN was for the kids who didn't know how to work ICQ. Yahoo Groups, which only shut down a few years ago, actually. I was trying to get some historical documents from one of their groups, but like Yahoo was no help, and we could not track down the people who originally ran it. It was a closed group, and now it's gone. The gist of it is, it used to be kind of tough to find people with like interests. But the advantage of that was you weren't restrained to be hosted somewhere. AIM, I remember that. Yep. Do you remember when the AOL used to give you 1 month of free internet on a CD? None was dumb enough to interrupt their employer, but none was really listening either. In the end, all that really mattered to them was the goal, which was some magic artifact, presumably located in a cavern at the foot of the Razor Peak Mountains. Apparently, until a recent earthquake, oh, no AOL here. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Guest books, yeah. Actually, guest books, for somebody who does some hobby internet history stuff, they're really helpful. Is Yahoo still a thing? I remember Monona back then when I hadn't heard of it since then. Yahoo's still a thing, yeah, for sure. Yahoo News does pretty well. Not much else. I think ICQ is still around, actually. I mean, I should say, last time I checked was like 6 years ago and it was still around. Apparently, until a recent earthquake, the entrance to the tunnels under the mountains had been lost. However, it was now rediscovered. It took Galen 2 hours to say that, which did not bode well for the ambience of their journey. Chum Store says, a guest book like when you go to a wedding or funeral. Yeah, but it was basically more like a messaging service. So what would happen is you would host an individual web page for whatever it was you were interested in. The way you might have a Facebook page now. But it was individually hosted, usually with GeoCities or something. And you would have a guest book. And if somebody shared in that interest that you had in their guest book, they'd be like, hey, here's my email. Why don't you contact me? I also like collecting dolls. And they're really handy if you're trying to figure out like a history of things. It took Galen 2 hours to say that, which did not bode well for the ambience of the rest of the journey. The night came swiftly. And Galen paid out for the meals and drinks. The next morning, and for a few days, the group hiked north. Galen would speak until the road grew steep. Then he would just wheeze. Yeah. Yeah, it was a more genuine and authentic connection, let's put it that way. I mean, you guys probably, if you don't know any of that, then you probably don't even know. Admittedly, it was a pretty narrow window of time, but you don't know the era of, like, finding a search engine, which used to be a big thing. Now it's all Google, basically. Or Bing, if you want to laugh. There are still other search engines, and Google has significant flaws, especially since its adoption of AI has basically ruined any credibility of its searches. But yeah, I mean, it used to be like, oh, I use web crawler, and oh, I use Ask Jeeves, and Google wasn't even really on the radar until 2001, 2002 or something. The next most talkative was I can't remember, I have the names on the next page. Karafi, or Nice. As she insisted she be called. She dealt mostly in jokes and occasionally cutting comments on the traits of her peers, which was least appreciated by the hulking and generally silent Epimetheus. Yeah. And you like, it has its advantages, I will say, Witchery. Like, there is a reason why, you know, having to figure out your own hosting to have your own webpage was kind of limiting. But the downside is that, like, you lose a lot of stuff, right? So in the era of forums, those forums, a lot of them are still being hosted because it doesn't cost too much to host a forum, and, you know, even if the person isn't in whatever hobby it's for, it's usually worth. Anyways, those are still around. But, like, if you try to find some old stuff on a Reddit that's, you know, got shut down or something like that, it's all gone. Unless you're lucky enough that it got backed up somewhere, which sometimes is the case. Yeah, it's treated the way it is by Americans in Canada, that word. But it just has different implications in different places. It's the gist of it. Which was least appreciated by the hulking and generally silent Epimetheus. The cleric, who after 2 days of hiking finally admitted his name, was Hubert Leebody. Never spoke, except to apologize for things no one need apologize for. Yeah, they're sort of an archive that forms themselves, and that's great for history. But they were a part-time job to run and build and manage and moderate. So, like, you know, you were lucky if you were in a hobby popular enough to have somebody who wanted to run the forum. If you didn't, I don't know, I guess you had web rings and email and, oh god, listservs. And don't even try to pretend like listservs were any good. What a nightmare. I know some people still stump for listservs, but just no. Although my one claim to fame, if it can even be called that, is I had a pug when I was younger, and I was on a listserv for pugs. And on that listserv was Dharma from Dharma and Greg, who apparently really liked pugs. And that was the odd thing about that time, because you would occasionally just discover you were talking to famous people because they shared in your hobby, and it wasn't so visible anymore as it is now, where everything has to be cultivated as a part of your image. I doubt anybody even knows Dharma and Greg anymore, really, but anyways, there's my 6 degrees. I like how you and I are just alienating any and all viewers under a certain age. Everyone was silent, though, when they climbed into the fissure that had torn open at the base of the Razor Mountains, of the Razor Peaks. And came into a massive bubble. It had long stalactites. Right. My cousin, who was a fan of the Addams Family, had a pug. She, of course, just had to name Pugsley. Oh. Zombie Wolf says, "Don't feel bad, Rory. I've been tuning you and Witchery out this whole time." I mean, I think that's the problem. I don't want people to have to like tune out my stream. That's a reason to not watch. Drooling from its high ceiling. That dribbled over It's still valuable white noise, yes. No, not stalactites. Stalagmites. Am I just not? Come on. It is stalagmite, wouldn't it? Don't tell me I'm lying. Witchery says, it's funny how short the internet has been around and how wildly different people's experiences are even this close in age. Yeah. But it kind of accelerated culture, doesn't it? You know, we're at a time, it made it so that generational cycles were like 5 years rather than 20. The walls, though mostly stained by an age of isolation, still revealed the hand-hewn marks of some ancient language that revealed this chamber to be a temple of sorts. Okay, chat. Of the four, who's going to touch the runes and activate the fight? Epimetheus, the warrior who's kind of stoic and grumpy. Hubert Leebody, the cleric who's shy. Karafi or Nice, the hyper and gregarious thief. Or Galen Blackwood, the wizard who's funding this expedition to find out something about this ancient magic society. Who touches the rune? YouTube didn't exist when I finished high school witchery, which was a memory I didn't actually remember, and then when I saw the date I was like, oh my god. Galen, he's our Pippin. Yes, you're right. This brought a careless ecstasy to Galen, who, unlike his seasoned, his adventured, adventure season, no, he's experienced. unlike his experienced hirees, was not used to living relics or still active wards. He ran to the nearest wall, and before each of his compatriots, I know I'm using that word a lot, but it's hard to come up with more words for groups of people you're with that aren't friends, could scream a chorus of stop, he ran his pudgy, mustard-stained forefinger down the groove of a hewn rune in the wall. It immediately burned red and spread across all the visible runes of the wide space until an ancient portal glowed from under the cavern lake ahead. Bursting forth from the clear waters came. Comrades! Good one. It's a good one. I should use that one more. Zombie Wolf says, since I'm about to turn 30, any advice from the 30s gang? Here's my best description of what to expect. When I turned 30, the week that I turned 30, I was lying in bed when I woke up. It's a couple of days after my birthday. I stretched in bed. I'm lying down, stretched in bed, and my neck went out. And it was out for 2 weeks. So welcome to 30. Your joints fall apart. So take care of them. Jump Store said the same thing, basically. That doesn't just mean don't do wear and tear, by the way. Okay, so this cavern has 3 exits. I don't want to forget that before I move on. All right. So let's do some combat, and then we'll call it, because I've gone super long. I'm sure, like, only the most hardcore are watching at this point, because we, the room we'd pulled, the card we'd pulled, like, an hour ago, had a monster in it. So we pull from the diamond pile here. And it is a Queen of Diamonds, and the drawing is just the cutest little Kirby's on a Christmas tree. Oh my god, it's adorable. it's 4 giant filth rats. It's up to us to determine what exactly that means, but they are diseased, and it tells us what diseased means down here. But first, let me put this in. 4 giant filth rats. They each have 3 health points. They each do a d4 in damage, and that's their attack roll, so they're unlikely to hit. GS makes a good point. You're not as old as you think. I will say 30 is just like... It is a sort of... I don't know if this is true for everybody, but like... It was a kind of like... Go journey and find yourself time. Like, I know your 20s are supposed to be that, but I think your 20s are like when you experiment with things. Identities and stuff like that. Your 30s are where you like... Really have to figure out who you are. As much as you're ever going to, you know, which can be a good experience, but nonetheless, it can sometimes be a painful one. There are things that you kind of take for granted in your 20s that get challenged in your 30s. But for the most part, age is not so bad. You know, the loss that time entails is always hard, but beyond that, it's not so bad. Diseased. On each hit, roll a d20. On a 1, a character's maximum HP is reduced by half until the next level. Yikes. But I think they have to hit us, which is unlikely. Okay, so let's do some combat. We always go first, our team. And because their attack rolls are all here in my hand, the d8, 2 d4s, and a d6, I'm just going to roll it all at once. Now remember, 1 to 3 never hits. So we're looking for 4 and above. So our cleric rolled a 2. They miss. Our wizard rolled a 2. They miss. Our thief rolled a 1. They miss. But our warrior rolled a 6. They hit. So now that I know they hit, I roll this again for the damage. And it's 7 damage. Now, I'm going to double check, but I'm pretty sure that we can decide to divide that damage up. Oh, okay, never mind. When any character or enemy is hit, the player, though damage may not be divided between multiple targets. Okay, I was wrong. I read that. I read wishfully how I wanted it to work. Okay, so we rolled 7 damage, which means we killed 1 of our giant filth rats. The rest are good for nothing. Well, the rest have other uses. It's never too late to be a hobbit. Yeah, I'm too tall as well, Witchery. We're going to have to be Ents. So now, the 3 remaining filth rats are going to roll their d4s. So I have 3 d4s here. This is the enemy's response. Jumpstart says, "You got this, Epimetheus. It's all you." Oh, damn. 1 hits. But the other 2 don't. They get a 1 and a 2. Okay, so 1 killed rat. First attack. Next attack. 1 rat hits. Okay. So that means 2 things. I have to roll that dice again to figure out how much damage they do. Attack dice and damage dice are always the same. However, with enemies, attack dice and subsequently damage dice don't necessarily indicate their health. They did 3 damage. That sucks. And now we have to decide who gets that damage. So chat. Epimetheus has 8 health points. Cleric has 6. Thief has 4. And Wizard has 4. Keeping in mind that after I apply the damage, I have to roll a d20. And on a 1, their health pool is halved. Who's taking 3 damage? I'll leave it up to chat. I guess while you guys decide who's taking the 3 damage, I'll roll for probably Galen. Okay. I'll roll for the next attack. Okay. Galen is nearly dead then. 1 out of 4. Let's roll our d20. It's a 4, so he doesn't get diseased. I appreciate that you folks are taking this as a, like, an RP thing. You know, not just tactical, putting it on the warrior. Okay, so this roll went a lot better. Epimetheus rolled a 7. The cleric, Hubert, rolled a 5. Our thief and wizard still miss, but to be fair to them, they only have a 25% chance of hitting. So that means the cleric and the Epimetheus, the warrior, get to roll their damage. I'm going to roll Epimetheus first. Ooh, nice. An 8. Though it doesn't really matter because he's only going to be killing 1. You can't spread the damage around. And the d6 is a 5. Okay, we killed 2 more. Okay, which means we're down to our last rat. Rolling the rat. It's a 2, so the rat misses. Which means we get to roll the party again. And Thief and Wizard still not very helpful in combat, but we got a 5 from Epimetheus and a 5 from the cleric, which I think, I mean, unless they roll really bad, should kill that rat. They rolled really bad, but they still killed the rat. Cleric rolled a 1, and Epimetheus rolled a 2, which means between the two of them, they just did enough damage to kill that one rat. Okay. As much as I'd love to describe the fight, I'm actually totally out of time. This is the longest stream I've ever done. So I'm going to read back. No, that's not true. The longest stream I ever did was the reading of I'm just leaving a little thing indication for me. Carmilla, yes, thank you. Zombie Wolf says, Rory, I'd argue if a thief is ever useful in combat. Well, in D&D 5e, rogues are DPS. Massive DPS. You know, I had a rogue character last night do, admittedly level 11, 57 damage or something, or 54 damage in one hit. Zombie Wolf says, I was hoping my birthday stream would be your longest. Well, I could just make the end screen 3 hours. Possessed by hunger and rage, Epimetheus stepped forward and drew his long silver blade. He grunted, "Stay back." "Oh, I'll be fine." Galen chuckled. "Why, it's just a few rats who are nothing more than a bit larger than normal." And so the fight ensued. Don't sing the rogue's praise. I don't really I don't really care one way about a rogue. I'm just saying, like, on a design perspective, the rogue has been made to be DPS. How people play rogues is a different story. Witchery says, randomly come back at some point, scream, then shut off the stream. Okay. I'm going to read this back. We're going to bail. I feel like I should probably play this game again. I don't know. You guys let me know. I probably will. I mean, this game was 100% me. I didn't think this was going to play really well and do really well in the numbers or anything. This was me wanting to play this game. If you're coming to this part of the stream, it's because you just want to know what we came up with, and you saw this was a very long stream, because it was. We played a game called One Shot in the Dark, which came from the same folks who do the Tale of the Manticore podcast, if you're familiar with that. It is a rules ultralight RPG for 1 to 4 players. It is basically a D&D, but with a much more stripped back rule set and some prompts for the dungeon system. And I really enjoy it. I had a lot of fun with it. I won't go back through the rules because we spent an hour doing that, but you're welcome to look at that if you care about the rules. But let me tell you what we came up with by reading you back the writing we created with it. The first indication that a stranger was in Epimetheus's favorite tavern was the odd and pungent odor of expensive cheese. No one in the town of Valenheim had the money nor will to splurge on moldy cheese made in the big city. They ate the carrots and turnips that grew plentiful in their farms, and that was good enough. Simple folk, generally farmers, after all, were the main populace of this simple village at the foot of the Razor Peak Range. Epimetheus, a soldier by trade but a mercenary as of late with the defeat of his king, was a native born to the small city, and so he had drunk many pints there between the walls of the Bardenleed Tavern. But today he was here not to drink, but to meet a wizard from the big city. That wizard, he was certain, was this hobbit in a stained robe with his bare feet kicked up on a stack of books, turning pages with his left hand and biting off chunks of cheese held in his right hand. Epimetheus pulled the tattered note from his pocket. Scribbled at the bottom, after the traditional missives, was the name Galen Blackwood. Epimetheus slid into the bench across from the feasting hobbit and said, "Galen, right?" Galen startled from his reading and kicked his stack of old tomes upon the floor as he swung upright to meet the gaze of Epimetheus. Oh, my, Galen said, erupting with a pungent burp. Then continued, "You are twice as large as I expected, which is good. We are going toward dangerous folk, after all, and a big heavy arm with a swing and a big heavy stick is exactly why you were recommended, Epidermis." Epimetheus, he corrected with a furrow of his brow that pulled his intricate red braids forward. Failing to read the room, Galen snorted, "I'm certain that's what I said." Epimetheus had a sharp word or two that wished to be loosed upon the stinky little hobbit, but before his better judgment could fail in such a way, as this was, after all, his new employer, the door swung open behind them, and in stepped an elf of unusual size with a wide grin. She turned to the tavern keep and in a boisterous voice said, "I found me a mumbling monk who apparently shares my employer, Fairkeeper, and that means I seek for him on both our behalf." The slender elf dipped into a dramatic bow towards the tavern keep. The tavern keeper chewed at the tobacco leaf in his cheek for a moment, then said, "What?" The elf, clearly a bit crestfallen that her rehearsed appearance hadn't made the desired impression, rephrased and said, "Galen, myself, and this..." She turned but stopped short, seeing no one behind her. With a frustrated frown, she swung the door she had just entered back open and saw a nervous robed man, apparently a cleric of one of the ascetic orders, leaning with his ear against the now absent door. She scolded, "Why didn't you follow me like we'd agreed?" Sorry, Carafi," the cleric muttered. Carafi grabbed the cloak of the cleric and pulled him into the tavern, continuing her conversation with the disinterested tavern keeper. "We are looking for Galen, something wood." "Blackwood!" Galen shouted from the table where he sat with Epimetheus. He waved the young elvish rogue over and her... He waved the young elvish rogue and her shuffling compatriot over. "Well, talk about size difference," the gregarious elf exclaimed, looking between the small hobbit covered in crumbs of cheese and the fire-haired Goliath with knees rising above the table line. "Well, that's why I've hired you," exclaimed the hobbit, "because each of you is something I'm not." For the next 2 hours, Galen Blackwood, renowned wizard and researcher of the arcane orders, lectured his hired team on the various strange magical phenomenon that interested him. I think that should actually be phenomena. Each statement about his field of study led to side statements clarifying some obscure word using more obscure words, and then that led to yet more clarifications on the statement that was clarifying the statement in the first place. The spider webs of thoughts that spilled from this self-assured little creature amounted to little interest from his company, who really just needed some work. None was dumb enough to interrupt their employee, but none was really listening either. In the end, all that really mattered to them was the goal, which apparently was some magic artifact presumably located in a cavern at the foot of the Razor Peak Mountains. Apparently, until a recently earthquake, the entrance to the tunnels under the mountains had been lost. However, it was now rediscovered with said earthquake, and it took Galen 2 hours to say that, which did not bode well for the ambience of their journey. The night came swiftly, and Galen paid out for the meals and drinks, as he would get used to doing. The next morning, and for a few days, the group hiked north. Galen would speak until the road grew steep, at which point he would just wheeze. The next most talkative was Carafi, or niece, as she insisted she be called. She dealt mostly in jokes and occasionally cutting comments on the traits of her peers, which was least appreciated by the hulking and generally silent Epimetheus. The cleric, who after 2 days of hiking finally admitted his name was Hubert Leabody, never spoke, except to apologize for things that no one needed to apologize for. Everyone was silent, though, when they climbed into the fissure that had torn open at the base of the Razor Peaks and came into a massive cavern. It had long stalactites drooling from its high ceiling that were building stalagmites one mineral-rich drop at a time below them. The walls, though mostly stained by an age of isolation here, still revealed the hand-hewn marks of some ancient languages that revealed this chamber to be a temple of sorts. This brought a careless ecstasy to Galen, who, unlike his experienced Tyrese, was not used to studying living relics or still active wards. He ran... not orally, it should be with. He ran to the nearest wall, and before each of his compatriots could scream a chorus of stop, he ran his pudgy, mustard-stained forefinger down the groove of a hewn rune in the wall. It immediately burned red and sped across the visible runes of the wide space until an ancient portal glowed from under the cavern lake ahead. Bursting forth from the clear waters came pustule-ridden rats, possessed by hunger and rage. Epimetheus stepped forward and drew his long silver blade. He grunted, "Stay back." "Oh, I'll be fine," Galen chuckled. "Why, it's just a few rats who are nothing more than a bit larger than normal." And so the fight ensued, which we did actually go through the mechanics of, but I ran out of time to write it. Jumpstore says the numbers time spent on this don't lie, where we are obligated to come back to this game by popular demand. I don't have my viewers up. I don't know if I got a lot of viewers, but I will say that I've enjoyed playing it. Zombie Wolf says random trivia starting back in 2013 when Netflix became available in Europe. Netflix closely monitors what shows and movies are being pirated to decide which ones they should purchase for their streaming library. Oh, interesting. Well, based on some of the changes coming to streaming services, maybe it's time to hoist that old flag. Anyhow, I enjoyed the hell out of this game. That's the beginning of our dungeon. We need to remember this dungeon, folks, because it's going to get closed before we can play this again, and that will delete it. There's no way for me to save this to this website, but it's not really hard to make this again. And we will focus on exploring the dungeon when we come back, which maybe is next week. I don't really have any super serious plans for next week, so maybe I'll just do this next week. I'll see how it does. If nobody's watching it, I can wait. I can do something else. Happy birthday to you, Zombie Wolf. Every age has its pros and cons. Don't be afraid of any of them. Jump Store, it was really good to see you. I know you had a couple of bad days there, so it was good to see your lovely thoughts in the chat again. I didn't have a chance to give you any tea. Fantasy tea. You'll have to remind me when we come back to this. GS, thank you for all your creative contributions. Tammy, I hope you're enjoying your time with, I think it was your son. And Uncle Kitty, I look forward to what you would have done differently or what you would have done with the characters here, because you always give me great recommendations. And of course, Genera, lovely to see you, even if it was briefly. I hope you enjoyed the parts you saw, and if you watch this back later, thanks for watching. And I hope I'm not missing anybody. It has been a long stream. Of course, thank you, Witchery, for the donation that made this game possible. If folks want to send me money, there's a link to do so in the description, but don't do it if you can't. We're just here to have fun for the most part. Nonetheless, you can no, I messed that up. I only say it every week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Get out of my shop.